Hello and welcome to The Booking Club, the podcast that brings you today's leading authors and commentators from a table at their favourite places to eat and drink. I'm your host, Jack Aldane. On this episode, I'm delighted to be speaking to TV personality and author Tom Reed-Wilson about his new book, Wonderful Words That Tell a Tale. Well, happy Diwali and happy Halloween to you, Tom.
Yes, les deux.
Thank you very much for joining me.
Very frightening sproglets outside.
Yes,
Did you
there
see
are.
them?
Yes, many.
Frantically ringing the
and
bell.
rather large sproglets as well, guiding them through the neighbourhood.
Yes, that's true.
The parents get involved here too.
Yes, and then completely the other end as well. I saw a very sassy-looking bunny rabbit.
Well, what do we mean by here? We mean Chelsea and
Yes.
specifically where we're sat here,
Lincoln
Q-tier.
Street. Yes,
on Lincoln
Q-tier,
Street.
which you would walk past thinking it's a little Georgian terraced house, wouldn't you? But that, I think, lends to its charm because you do feel like that even with the interior, but then that's juxtaposed with these images of India everywhere. I mean, the wildlife, the flora, the fauna. Even just now I went and spent a penny and there were these amazing orange trees from India. And I mean, even the reed diffusers have these evocative smells of cardamom, and it's so beautifully rendered, isn't it?
I think almost anyone who's been to an Indian restaurant will say that one of the first things that hits them is the heady fragrance, not just of the kitchen, but of the incense. There's always this really intoxicating smell, isn't there? And always these very intricate, very complex, busy patterns on the wall. And as you say, the maps on the wall. Q-tier, as you say, has that really quaint structure to the building that makes it seem like a very English kind of townhouse as well. It's just that perfect blend, isn't it?
It's an amazing melange. It really is. And also there's a preponderance of green and teal everywhere, which finds that kind of wonderful tranquility. Oh,
thank you very much. Yeah, big fan of these colours, in fact.
Yes, my house is dotted with them.
Yes?
I find them very tranquil.
Big teal fan?
Yes. And every shade of green, actually. I can't think of a shade of green I don't like.
So tell us why you've chosen Q-tier.
Oh,
It sounds like it's a place that you go back quite a ways with.
Yes. So there are so many reasons, Jack. I mean, the reason this restaurant specifically, the lady that used to run Lime Pictures, which is the production company that makes Celebs Go Dating, which is probably the thing I'm best known for, is a lady called Sarah Tykef, who's incredibly beautiful, sage, warm, affable. And she knew that I was dotty about Indian food. And she said, you must go to Q-tier. It's my favourite restaurant in all of Chelsea. And then I said, Chelsea? I live in Chelsea. So it felt like kismet. But I suppose the bigger reason, the reason that I love that kaleidoscopic palette of India and Sri Lanka is my dad, because my dad grew up in Sri Lanka when it was Ceylon until he was 15. And so although he didn't learn to cook there, he learned about that vast panoply of spices and became very enamoured of them. And then when he went to university in Cambridge, his flatmate and his best chum was Indian and taught him how to make curries authentically. And unlike a lot of students, they mostly exercised real culinary wizardry at home. And he makes the best curry I've ever had outside of a restaurant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So.
Oh, thank you. This is going to be the artificial beginning of my weekend because I don't have a tipple in the week, Jack. But, and this is a Thursday, this particular Halloween.
Which has become more and more of a Friday. Have you found that
Yes.
over the years? I don't know what's happened.
Well, I'm
but-
bringing my whole weekend forward by a day because I'm shooting a new show next week, so I need to have a very abstemious Sunday. And also, it's a show where I host and have rather a lot to say, but because it's rather cumbersome and might get in the way, and they want the cameras to be ultra mobile, there's no auto cue. So I sort of have to learn this sort of Hamlet, really, of the whole series, and commit my pieces to camera to memory.
Of course, I have it here with me, the book.
Oh, I say.
I mean, one thing that any of your followers will know through following you on TikTok, Instagram, and all other social platforms is that you very rarely need any reading aid to recite off by heart. But I brought it here just in case.
Oh!
Because I thought that one way we could delve into the contents of this book was to take, let's say, the word cutear, and just pick the letters of that word, and you give us a flavour of the book by specifically reading the poems connected to
that
K-U-T-I.
Well, I can recite,
Do you think that's right?
I can recite the letter for that letter. I know what it is. It's kimono. It's one of my favourite renderings of a word by the artist Ian Morris, who's my great chum.
The illustrator of the book.
The illustrator
Let's
of the book.
talk a little bit first, though, about the book itself. We haven't even mentioned the title yet. Wonderful Words That Tell a Tale, an etymological exploration of over 100 extraordinary words, as you say.
You said that beautifully, Jack.
Well, thank you very much. I hope I say things beautifully enough to host a podcast. But
yes, as you say, because I'm running before I can walk here, I should explain the concept. In the lockdowns, the lady that runs the children's department of my imprint, Quarto, became very happily and quite by accident a devotee of Word of the Day, which I do on Instagram. And I explore language through the lens of etymology sometimes, if it's got fun or surprising roots, or maybe a very surprising etymological sibling that takes a kind of a sharp left turn from the root, but also delicious words that are fun to say and fun to chew on and so on. And she found those, and she got in touch and said, do you think that you could make this into a dictionary for children? And because it was the lockdown, I was homeschooling my eldest goddaughter in English, and she's quite dyslexic. And so we found etymology was a very handy key into the door of language, which helped her cement the meanings of words, but also the spellings. So I said, could I do it through an etymological lens, and could I do it through a poetic lens? Because with my younger sproglets, I found that thing of suspending a rhyme so that they guess the last word was aiding their vocabulary as well. So, to cut a very long story short, I was allowed to do all of these things that I very much wanted to do. And so my first etymological picture dictionary was born, which was called Every Word Tells a Story. And 4 words were ascribed to each letter of the alphabet. The first big double-page spread was always an etymological poem, and then overleaf 3 bonus etymological studies. And that was successful enough to warrant a sequel, by which time I'd done a big schools book tour and festivals tour with my wonderful illustrator, who in his own right is such a storyteller through art. And he became such a chum. I mean, I'm so inspired by him, and he works so fast, but not omitting any detail with his tremendous speed. And so this time it was truly collaborative, because everything was hand-painted, and I got to see his portfolio live, and he would send me pictures as he progressed. So it was an absolute boon this time. And the format's the same, again, 4 words ascribed to each letter of the alphabet. And K for cutear is kimono in our new book. And it goes, kimonos are specific things. They're robes with silken sleeves like wings, tied with sashes at the waist to help a person dress in haste. Kimono, though, in Japanese, has no particularities. Keys put on and mono's thing. It could mean pants or coat or sling.
Well, that's just wonderful. I mean, about Ian Morris, yeah, he draws a lot from life, doesn't he? He likes to study the way people really are, which is interesting, which you don't normally associate with children's books, that when people are depicted, they're normally depicted as the idea of people.
That's a brilliant observation, Jack. And I think that one thing that happens because of that is that one always senses movement in his drawings. I think he's the most dynamic illustrator. Yesterday we spent a whole day doing book signings, and then we went to the imprint and we made some recordings together, and he was drawing live as I recited pieces from the book, and even those very fast renderings seemed to have movement in them. It dazzled me. It's such an assault on the retina, because I could see the boy with the yo-yo, and I could see the yo-yo moving, and I was thinking, how does he do that? It's really, he's sort of a sorcerer in a way.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I've had illustrators on the Booking Club before, those who've actually written books as well as being professional illustrators. You mentioned the word sorcerer. One of the illustrators I've had on the podcast more than once is Martin Rowson of The Guardian. And he talks about cartooning as a sort of black magic, especially when it's satirical, because you're casting a spell on your subject.
And if you see something in that person, you can draw it out through their features. I mean, it's like those wonderful, I don't know who did them, I'm ashamed to say, but the person that did all the cartoons, the theatrical cartoons in Sardis, I don't know if you've seen those, with everybody from Noel Coward to Carol Channing. And he sees something in them, whether it's impish or naughty or irreverent or warm, and somehow, through slightly exaggerating a feature or two, you see it in their countenance. I don't know how it's done.
I know, it's incredible.
It is sorcery.
Enough about the pictures, though. Let's talk about the words. I love the story you told just now about teaching your goddaughter over the lockdowns and her dyslexia, and etymology, as you say, being the key into the door of language. Now, let's pause on that for a minute, because very rarely does a teacher at the level of primary school or even secondary school ever seek to unearth the origins of words for the benefit of people's understanding of language.
Yes.
But it's so important. And not only that, it's so fun.
Well, one of the joys of this book is I have discovered where it is happening. And there's a school in Hackney that I've just finished a recording for from the book, where a primary school, if you please, where one of the teachers is using etymology to teach. And I completely agree with you, because I think the reason and the resistance is the notion that it's a rather highfalutin, grand way to teach English. And I think it's actually easier, because what it does is it makes a kind of a jigsaw puzzle out of the language, where you see where the constituent parts fit in other places, which I think is enormously helpful.
Absolutely. We'll come on to more of that in a moment. But do you have already a sense of what you might like to order? Because you've been here before, and I've looked at the menu meanwhile.
Have you drunk it all in?
I have, yeah.
Oh, good.
I know what I like, but I'm also open.
Well, now, this might queer the pitch slightly, because their starters are so good here. But my inclination is to dive straight into a main, because I am also dotty about their puddings. I've such a sweet tooth, Jack.
Right.
But you must have a starter if you want a starter.
Well, look, starters at Indian restaurants are not like starters anywhere else. They are almost a must every time, aren't they?
They are, and they are sensational.
And interestingly, desserts at Indian restaurants tend to be the easiest to overlook. So it's interesting that you say you're keener on the desserts than you are the starters.
Well, it's a curious thing here, because every other course is very, very authentically Punjabi. But the puddings, I think, I don't know if they would disagree with me, but I think they're kind of a Euro-Indian fusion almost.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And they are so toothsome, I can't tell you. But
I think I will go for the lamb shank.
Ooh, very nice. I'm going to go for the venison with green peppercorn, slow-cooked, clarified butter, yogurt. We must describe it all, mustn't we? Because this is an otic experience.
And what does otic mean, for those wondering?
Of the ear.
I always use the word oral, spelled A-U-R-A-L.
Yes, but I tend to favour otic because it doesn't confuse people as much, because you do have to spell oral when you say oral, don't you? Because
yes.
You have to say oral, I mean ear.
Yes, that's true. So I'm going to use otic from now on.
Otic's great.
Much less ambiguous.
And I talk about music as an otic delight often.
Yeah.
Ella Fitzgerald is my ultimate otic delight.
Fantastic. It's got the nice staccato to it,
Hasn't
doesn't it?
Yes.
That oral doesn't quite as much.
Yes, it somehow is musical.
Yeah.
It's percussive. So it works.
Well, we might be ready to order in that case.
Yeah. But you're right about this, because actually the last time I came, I made a meal of the starters.
I think I will have a starter.
You must have a starter.
But it will be keema. The keema pal. Yeah.
And I have a liquid starter.
What more do you need?
Quite.
A main, probably.
Quite.
Yeah.
Yes, I will need something to sop up the champagne very shortly.
Over to you, Tom.
I am going to skip starter, just because I'm being fractionally abstemious, not that you can tell, and go straight for the venison. Venison green pepper. Thank you so much. Yes.
Let's travel over now to the letter U. Here we go, we've got the uniform poem here.
Oh, well, I can read it, certainly. You might be in uniform reading this through, smart in your blazer of red, white, or blue. Uniforms help you to identify those wearing a set of identical clothes. The Latin words uni and forma combine to give us one form, or for clothes, one design. A uniform shows you are part of a team, but the word has more uses, as dancers can seem to move uniformly, where like a dreamscape, multiple bodies can take on one shape. There is a magic that's second to none to see lots of dancers all moving as one.
Where did your love affair with words begin, Tom? You write about it at the very end of the book, and I like that you do that, because it's good to explain to any readership how a book comes about, I think.
It is my dad. It really came from my dad. Although not exclusively, because my mum is a great linguist. She teaches French and taught me French more formally via Zoom in the lockdowns.
And was an actress, no?
Yes. Oh, you've done your homework, Jack. But my dad, he taught English before he retired. And when we were knee-high to grasshoppers, I mean, I remember one thing very distinctly when we went shopping and we went past a very beautiful window display, and he said, "Look at that gorgeous festive display in the window." And then he said, "Window, from the Dutch, van de auge, the wind's eye, nothing to do with glass, all to do with the breeze hopping in and out of the holes in buildings." And I think I was probably 7. And I had my first kind of big epiphanic moment, because I thought, gosh, rather prosaic words have stories buried within them via their constituent parts. And that was startling to me, and of course sent me down a rabbit hole that was lifelong. But the other thing that he did, which is why I think my word of the day is a two-pronged fork, some of it's just the deliciousness of certain words otically, and chewing on them, and the other is the delicious surprise of their etymology, is that he would also do what I call a dance of the synonyms as a kind of a game for himself. So not all that long ago. I met him halfway between his home in Dorset and mine here in Winchester, which we do sort of quarterly, I think. And as I left, he said, "Well, Sonny Jim, this was lovely, but all too brief, fleeting, short-lived, ephemeral, and just the joy of clutching at synonyms."
Yes, yeah.
It's just heaven to behold, and I feel exactly the same way. It's thrilling, as you say, weighing and trying to really identify the perfect word, not just one that will do, but the absolutely perfect word.
It's a game you play every day if you're inclined to, and it's so fun. Of course, if you write for a living, especially if you're a journalist, you're filled with all of those maxims from the likes of Mark Twain. If you see an adjective, squash it. You know, that sort of idea. But the reality is that language is there for us to enjoy and play around with. And as I say, I think that you writing this book drives this home at a very important age for children, but also I think invites adults into a world that they had no idea of before. I mean, normally parents are expected to read a book to their children and learn nothing, but know that what they're passing on through the book will mean everything to the child. With this, everyone is able to be fascinated.
I found as an uncle, I've tried to be a very hands-on uncle and godfather. I've got 4 godkids and 3 nephews. And I find that one of the absolute boons about it, which I never thought about before, is that it's a little bit like going back to school, you know, because you do these wonderful, you have these amazing excursions. Kids' theatre, I think, is an absolute revelation to me. The museums are wonderful, and often they put on things for kids that are completely free or very inexpensive. And of course, reading, and you learn all sorts of things via their interests. You know, you learn more about dinosaurs. You just learn things that I think you operate through such a tunnel of personal interest when you're learning, and gradually narrow the field. And kids teach you not to have that sort of tunnel vision anymore, because it's all altruistic, it's all guided by their fascinations, and so you learn about all kinds of things. And I've learnt writing the book. I learnt more, I think, on the second book, because I'd done this schools tour and found out what fascinated the kids there. I mean, for example, I had a big fight for the word xylospongium in the book, which is xylospongium, which was letter X, and my editor said, "I think it might be a bit complicated," and I said, "Well, it's a sponge on a stick that the Romans used in public lavatories, and in the name of hygiene would stick this shared instrument into a vat of vinegar to keep it clean." But I learned from these schools that anything scatological, children just lap up.
Yes.
And that sort of slight veering towards horrible histories, occasionally. I
was about to say.
Yes, it's that. And there's a reason that that's so hugely successful, because if you can get into the kind of the pooey, grimy, repugnant pockets of history, children adore it. And suddenly they want to know all about it, you know.
Before the food arrives, let's
finish this
before the food arrives. Let's get off that topic, but on to the letter T.
This is a little bit of Cockney rhyming slang. Also a bit of a love letter to my dad, as you'll hear in the poem. So this one I can recite, I think. Titfer. Have a butcher's at my fish means have a good look at my book. In this Cockney slang, rhyming words are removed, so butchers and fish lose their hook. In parts of Victorian London, it helped if you chatted in code. It made snooping harder for snoopers who'd eavesdrop while others offload. Here is my father's firm favourite, and my first choice too, come to that. Tit for tat, or titfer for short, the Cockney coin word for a hat.
Who let Danny Dyer into Qt here? Astonishing. That was titfer.
That was Titfer. I'm afraid all my accents are sort of somewhere in my boots. They're all about 3 octaves lower. I don't know why.
What I'd like to do is to, while I'm enjoying this and we're waiting for our mains, Tom, ask you about the propensity of people to overuse adjectives. We know what adjectives they are, generally speaking. When anyone wants to say that anything is good, we know they tend to reach for amazing. And there are probably many other examples. What are the ones that, if not get under your skin, then the ones that you think that people maybe could try out more often than they do? Because we could all probably do with refreshing our adjectives, couldn't we?
You know how one's frontal lobe races ahead of the person talking to you sometimes, and you try to second guess what they're going to ask you. I thought you were going to say, which ones do you overuse? And my answer to the question that you haven't asked me.
That is also a good question. Maybe we start with that.
Well, because I actually, even though I do delight in finding very specific words.
Yeah, you also have your crutches as well.
I do, and I definitely overuse lovely. I and delicious.
Mm-hmm. Delicious is a really hard one to replace, isn't it? I mean,
very hard.
If anything ever tastes good, I mean, what else do you say?
Toothsome,
which
is another one that I hugely overuse. And in both cases, actually, I probably overuse them more in reference to people than to food. But I don't know. Thing is, I so enjoy the divergence of speech that I think an overused adjective would only annoy me if I were the one overusing it curiously. Mm-hmm. Because in somebody else, it would be, I suppose if I lived with them, it might get irksome, but it's just part of the rich tapestry, isn't it? You know, and I feel exactly the same way about accents. That's an etymology I love because it means a regional song, really. It's the same. The scent bit is the bit that appears in descant and cantata, and it's all about singing. And it's wonderful for me, especially with an acting background, because I always find the music of an accent the way into an accent. And it's always the thing I enjoy about an accent most too, is the lyrical quality of it, as opposed to the divergent vowel sounds, you know, or the divergent emphases. It's the way the tune differs, which I love. And I heard once, I don't know if it's true, that birds have different accents too because they imitate that song. And in cities, they sing much faster and they imitate the traffic. And in the countryside, their musical pace is much, much slower and more lilting.
That's fascinating.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's not just human.
I mean, I feel like I want to go deeper into that subject now.
Yes,
but
I long to know more.
Yeah.
We need an ornithologist.
Yeah. Okay, so K, U, T, and now on to I. What word are we going to look at here now?
It feels like Mary Poppins, Jack.
It does, yeah.
Them singing supercalifragilistic and spelling it out on stage. So I is icing, and I think I can recite it. Bakers in America don't ice a cake, they frost. With either word, the chili theme has not been scrapped or lost. Colouring for food arrived in 1856, so until then cake toppings were a sugared egg white mix. When dolloped onto cakes, the blend would set to look like snow, and icing seemed the perfect word for what might stop the show. A decorated snowscape was a must for every cake. Just think what a spectacular confection it would make.
There's a little applause into the microphone. I love these. They're fantastic.
Do you know, you just reminded me of a chemistry teacher I had who I very seldom got anything right in chemistry. And he used to do something that made me curdle, where if I did get something moderately right, which was about as far as I could go, he would do a round of applause with his thumbnails.
Oh,
he
really?
would say, it's worthy of a mini round of applause. And he would go, I don't know if you can hear this. He would go like that with his thumbnails. And
The very definition of condescending.
Makes me curdle. Yes, it was.
My apologies for that then.
No. That was rather lovely because it was melodic. But
I didn't know what else to do with my hands, you see. I was eating.
It did remind me of that.
Is there any such thing as a word that you don't like? I mean, I suppose in a way, if you have a love for language, it's hard, I suppose, to find yourself disliking any aspect of it. A bit like if you were an ornithologist, say.
Yes,
you ask an ornithologist, is there a bird you don't like? They'll be like, no, I love birds. You love words. But you alluded just there to the fact that there might be a word that you're less keen on.
Yes. So I think the words that are inclined to be bugbears for me are either ones that are used euphemistically in a way I don't like or find a little bit unpleasant. Like bloke. I don't like bloke. I don't mind being called. It's curious actually because I don't mind being called a lad.
Mm-hmm. But bloke, much less so.
Yes, somehow to me lads seems fraternal and warm, whereas bloke seems to kind of thinly veil something a bit nastier sometimes.
It keeps its distance, doesn't it?
It does. It's an alienating word. It's like mate can be a bit like that, I think. That you don't feel particularly close to somebody when they call you mate, unless it's their absolute chosen word, and it's a special word to them and you've qualified as their mate. But I think it can be a keep you at arm's length kind of a word.
That's true. Interestingly, my last guest was the comedian Jeff Norcott, who appeared live with me at the Battle of Ideas Festival to talk about his latest book, The British Bloke Decoded. Very funny book, which brings the word bloke into a different conversation about why your average bloke says the things that he thinks does and says. But it also explains the origins. Do you know the origins?
No, I actually don't know the etymology, but I do with mate, actually, and it's very pertinent to what we're doing now.
Tell us about mate in a moment.
Yes, because that has a lovely etymology.
The word bloke comes from the Dutch blok, which is where we get the word blockhead.
Oh, I see.
So you're quite right to identify that side to the word bloke that does seem a bit hostile.
Yeah,
and slightly,
moron, really. Yeah. Yes.
But tell us about mate, because that's by far the more used, isn't it?
Mate and also companion are words that are very pertinent to what we're doing here, because a mate is a variation on meat, and meat in the old days was all food, which was why we had sweetmeats, because it needed a bit more specificity. And so your mate was the person with whom you were intimate enough to share your meat. And companion was the person that you would break your pan with, your bread with.
Ah, right.
So they're really rather lovely because, I think dining was always historically a more intimate experience, and so it's a special thing that kind of harks back to another culinary time.
And of course, it may. I mean, often with etymology, what you get are those, as you put it earlier, epiphanic moments, the moments that make you think, "How did I not see it? How did I not see, for example, when I was learning French at school, that the word copain, one of those clear, those first words you learn, referred to a cooperative with bread, pan, and it just makes so much sense. There's just so many of those, aren't there? That kind of.
Oh, there are so many of them, and I mean, matrimony is another one that it's an avenue to motherhood. It's got that mattress in it of mother, and that the word is exclusively concerned with progeny and all of that.
Yeah.
My favourite one in terms of taking a sharp left turn from the root is testicle. Do you know about that one?
I hear the word testicle. Someone asks me to explain the origin, and I go, test dates back to ancient Greece, around the punitive measures that were doled out for failing an exam. And had a lot to do with getting hurt in the bollocks. Now, I think I've gotten that skewed somehow. How far off the mark am I?
Quite far off, but but I love that. That's absolutely delicious.
It was probably told to me by another kid at school who didn't know either, and just...
Well, it is connected to test in a way. It comes from testis, meaning witness, and I suppose a test is a witness to your academic progress, but testify and attest and testimony and all those witnessy words are very direct lines. And the sharp left turn is, of course, testicle, which your testicles are, etymologically speaking, your little witnesses to semen secretion. Which I love because it's so tenuous.
The testicles are witnesses.
They're witnesses.
To your
They're
semen
corporeal
secretion.
witnesses to, to the sexual act, but also
Yeah.
to semen secretion, yeah.
Do you need witnesses down there?
Do you?
I mean,
don't know. Maybe
Such an
it's
odd
those
thing.
little swimmers and
Yeah.
they're making sure that they go. Bon voyage, safe travel.
I know that the word avocado,
Oh, yes.
doesn't
Also
it?
testicles.
Yeah, it translates to...
Yeah, a very unhealthy scrotum, it looks like to me.
So, Tom,
Yes.
the mains, what can we say about them? Describe them in as many adjectives as you can think of
Golly
off the top of your head. Starting with the obvious.
Well, I had venison in a green peppercorn sauce. And the venison, I know it's a cliche to say it, but it really was melt in the mouth. It was utterly toothsome. And the green peppercorn sauce was amazing because it had a kind of a secondary and even a tertiary piquancy and was so multifaceted. How was your shank?
So you used the word amazing there, but then you qualified it by saying it was multifaceted, which suggests that there was something that drew you into a maze of different dimensions, which I'll accept. I'll accept amazing from you, Tom, for that reason. Mine, utterly delicious there.
Oh,
It
is
was.
the perfect word. There was
It fell off the bone. I just wish that it were colder outside, but there's very
Yes.
little that could improve a lamb shank like that, aside from the weather. We come to the final letter in our 5-letter
Yes.
theme here of Q-tier, R, which I believe you said earlier is ranch in the
is
book.
ranch. And I think I can recite it. It goes... A farm in the States that is bigger than big is usually called a ranch. Their 600 million acres of fields add up to a sizable tranche. To keep a ranch running from morning to night, the farm would need many a hand. When laborers stopped for a well-deserved bite, they met in a hut on their land. In Spanish, the name for this ravenous group was rancho, which came to apply to all of the farm, where everyone worked, not just the gang eating pie.
Tom Reed Wilson, thank you. Thank you for this wonderful
my
journey.
internal
Yes.
Texan.
Through the word Q-tier. We are now looking at the dessert menu, and I think
Indeed
you've
we
come
are.
to a decision as to what you'd like, as have I. And that only leaves me to ask you to sign my copy of your book to my goddaughter. Her name is Nola. She lives in Atlanta, Georgia.
Beautiful name.
And I will be sending this to her, or giving it to her in person when I see her, hopefully next year.
Oh, what a wonderful godpapa you are.
We've been talking this evening about wonderful words that tell a tale, an etymological exploration of over 100 extraordinary words. This is a book I'd recommend to anybody, parent, non-parent, child, adult, young, old. Thank you very much,
Thank
Tom Reed
you,
Wilson,
and
for
thank
joining
you
me
for-
on the Booking Club.
It's been a real pleasure.
To etymology.
To etymology.